Hi, my name is Caitlin Nash, and for my translational element, I chose to create a narrated slides presentation for an audience that are introductory bilingual language learners in training, or for college age level students or audience that are learning about language education programs. My goal was really to target those that are working on developing academic writing who have a sense of humor, but are also just kind of simple in their questions. I find that when I am doing a lot of my academic writing, I have to come up with the right academic jargon and literary terms to really match that academic audience. And sometimes I just wish it could be so much more simple. So moving in, as I mentioned, my theme for my capstone project was K through 12 language education programs in the United States. So, what does research indicate as the most effective K through 12 language education program to meet the needs of emergent bilingual students in the U.S.? I apologize, some of my slides is cut off by the screencast. Now, you will notice in my slides, I have kind of a layman's question down below that says, what I really meant in my overarching question is, are there any states in the U.S. that are doing language education right? My three research questions were, which states in the U.S. have formal language policies for bi or multicultural students? Which programs are currently being implemented in relation to the language policies in U.S. K through 12 schools? And what does research say about the impacts of dual language bilingual education programs? Now, what I really meant is there a best English language education program that has magical powers? Throughout our education and master's program and just being a teacher, especially for multilingual education, there is so much controversy and debate over which programs are most effective. Again, this is cutting out. Let me see if I can move this over. But if you notice the purple and then the blue, purple is what it was formerly called, and blue is now the terminology that is correctly, I guess, more current. So bilingual education, for instance, is a program that provides instruction in both the native language and in English, and it is now called dual language bilingual programs. I included this glossary just to help with terminology because my research paper was so extensive. Also, just kind of touching on sheltered English instruction, structured English immersion programs, the different types of transitional language programs, and two-way bilingual education programs. Different language education programs in the U.S. Now, let me see, I'm going to move this down. There are three main models that I focused on: monolingual English-only instruction, transitional bilingual education, and dual language immersion programs. Now, in these three models, monolingual English-only instruction, this is where our programs are primarily focused on gaining English proficiency with really a low involvement of a student's native language, and a student is typically being instructed for 90 to 100% of the time in English. Transitional bilingual education really emphasizes the transition from a student's native language to becoming proficient in English. And they use the academic instruction for the first language for part of the day. These programs typically last 2 to 4 years and sometimes longer. In the second section of the day, ESL is kind of focused with the focus on language as well as participating in mainstream classes. But ultimately, transitional bilingual is really with the idea of a student's native language becoming fluent in English acquisition. Dual language immersion programs, however, are kind of the focus that I really came into this study kind of with a bias and kind of a preconceived idea that this was the best program. Dual language immersion programs, direct instruction is given by a teacher who's typically fluent in both languages, or two teachers can each speak alternate languages being instructed. Half of the students speak the same native language, and the other half are native English speakers, and the content is taught in both languages. I also kind of included some of the things that I mistakenly believed prior to starting my master's program. Prior to starting my master's program, I really thought bilingual education was kind of the umbrella terminology for all language education models. And some of the other things, such as I thought that English was the official language of the US. And I did have the preconceived idea that language programs are failing all of our English learning students. Now, I am not going to be able to go through all of these statistics, but my question was, what states in the US have official language programs? So Arizona, where I live and teach, is the last remaining state with an English-only language program. Prior to the last 5-6 years, both Massachusetts and California were anti-bilingual, but since 2016-17, they passed language policies to implement bilingual education programs. So basically, not every state in the US has mandated ESL or bilingual programs. I did create a extensive chart, and let me see if I can drag my screen down. I did include this. This is the link that I created for all the different state programs for the US and how they identify ELs and what states are currently operating under which language education program. Currently, 39 states require English language proficiency screening assessment. Out of the 50 states in the US, approximately 21 states require in-home language surveys. 39 states provide professional development, teaching standards, certification, or endorsements for EL-specific teachers. Now, let's see. Now, dual language immersion programs, pros and cons. As I mentioned, I did spend a good amount of time going through each of the language education programs, but I did have a focus on dual language immersion programs. Going into this, the pros. Developing, these programs are developed with the intent to shift a monolingual society to becoming multilingual. Research kind of shares the effectiveness of dual language immersion because, as well as the social, economic, and cognitive advantages of bilingual, biliterate students. ELs have proven to master academic English skills better than traditional English as a second language programs, even when only 50% or less of the research suggests that students in the program, or 50% of English is being instructed on. Cons. This was something I was really unaware of. The gentrification and the focus is shifting from non-native English speakers to benefit English-speaking students. One thing that I was really surprised about is how much white middle-class parents are really wanting their kids to have bilingual education, and instead of really serving the needs of our emergent bilinguals, it is more now serving the needs of English-speaking students. History of the language. Now, I went back to the history of the language in the US to really kind of get more background, and it was really interesting, kind of going back into the colonization of the original 13 states, and the colonies in the US were established by Great Britain, but also colonists from France, Germany, and Spain. We have currently 350 different languages approximately spoken in the US. The Constitution allows each state to declare an official language, of which 31 have declared English the official language. It is interesting that despite this, the mosaic of cultures, these statistics haven't transpired into more development of more diverse language education programs and policies in the US. What are the results? Now, through all my findings, basically my findings were that there really is no precise equation or one-size-fits-all model to instruct ELs that yield the same results. But when there's no EL instruction, students fare much worse on academic measures if they're merely just pushed into mainstream classrooms. All students have varied needs, resources, and resolve. And, a few key points of ensuring EL student success are to have a language program implemented, maintain standards, and provide challenging content to ELs. implications, how we can do better. Again, these are some of the things that we can do just to implement more equity and more engaging, rigorous content, developing more early childhood programs to serve EL populations, better training, preparation for educators, and allocating more resources for developing existing EL programs. Conclusions. Ultimately, I still did come to the conclusion that dual language programs really are the one that I would choose the most. Even though there are controversies taking place, it's the educational language model that really does have a lot of opportunity for growth and engaging equity with both English-speaking native English speakers and non-native English speakers. The most successful program models are those that develop academic skills while learning English, and they're built to meet the linguistic, academic, and affective needs of students. They're able to provide culturally responsive instruction and providing that equitable opportunity to progress through school at a similar rate to native English-speaking peers. I'm out of time, and I hope that you enjoyed this. I have my reference links, and I've also included the link to this presentation. Thank you.